Imagine the night gently settling over the earth. The air is filled with a quiet coolness, and a light breeze rustles the leaves of the trees. Far across the fields, a solitary fire flickers in a distant hearth, and you can barely hear an owl hiding somewhere in the shadows. Everything around seems to slow down, and the world is ready to tell its most treasured stories. Make yourself comfortable. Feel the softness of your pillow, the warmth wrapping around you, the lightness in your shoulders. Close your eyes and take a deep breath. Tonight, you will discover the secret marriages of gods and mortals, unions full of beauty, mystery, and gentle magic. Let this journey be soft, slow, so that every story touches the heart and lulls the imagination. Tune in to this night, these secrets, and every emotion that will slowly, like a gentle evening breeze, fill you. In ancient Greece, when the boundaries between gods and mortals were still thin and uncertain, Alcmene lived a quiet life in a small village nestled at the foot of rolling hills. Her home was modest but orderly, warmed by the hearth and scented with fresh bread, herbs, and the earthy air of the surrounding fields. She was known for her intelligence, grace, and careful attention to the world around her. These qualities marked her as perceptive and resilient, characteristics that would not go unnoticed by the gods. Zeus had watched many mortals, but Alcmene was different. She possessed the rare combination of curiosity, discernment, and endurance, a mortal capable of containing and nurturing the spark of divinity. In the eyes of Olympus, she was the perfect vessel for a child who would inherit both mortal courage and divine power. The decision to come to her was deliberate, a weaving of fate where choice and destiny would converge in a single night. One stormy evening, as lightning flickered across the hills and rain tapped against the windows, Alcmene moved through her home, performing her usual tasks. The fire cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the wind carried the scent of wet earth and blooming herbs. At the doorway, a figure appeared. For a moment, Alcmene thought it was her husband, Amphitryon, returning from the fields, but there was a subtle difference, a quiet authority, a depth of presence that went beyond anything human. This was Zeus, taking the form of her husband for a night that would alter the course of mortal history. As the night deepened, Alcmene observed him closely, noticing the subtleties that would normally escape her attention. The tilt of his head, the gentle modulation of his voice, the way he listened without interruption. Between them a rhythm formed, a mutual flow that required no effort. It moved naturally, like water around stones. Zeus' presence carried a nearly imperceptible tension, brushing the edges of Alcmene's consciousness. It was not fear, but awareness of the extraordinary, the sense that she was in the presence of something greater than herself. In his eyes she saw curiosity, restraint, and a careful probing of mortal perception. Each movement, each subtle shift, conveyed both protection and admiration. Time in the room stretched beyond ordinary measures. Words and gestures interwove into a complex web of understanding. Alcmene sensed invisible threads linking them, threads of recognition, promise, and the nascent shaping of destiny. Every smile, attentive glance, and nuanced movement became part of an unspoken dialogue, acknowledging differences while discovering rare common ground. She reflected on her life, her duties, and her place in the village, all of which seemed suspended in the presence of something greater. Her gaze lingered on his eyes, searching for the being behind the human form, and she saw patience, wisdom, and intensity characteristic of a mind accustomed to worlds beyond her comprehension. And yet, in the small space between them, there was softness, a readiness to honor her humanity rather than overwhelm it. Gradually, Alcmene's initial uncertainty gave way to cautious understanding. She realized she was participating not merely in a meeting, but in the crossing of fates, her own life, the divine design, and the future that would emerge from their union. Zeus spoke of ordinary matters in a way that made them extraordinary, transforming everyday details into moments resonating beyond the room. Questions about the stars, remarks about the wind, reflections on the flicker of firelight, all became part of a larger tapestry, binding their attention together. Alcmene answered, aware that she was now part of a narrative far greater than herself, yet still rooted in her world. The warmth of the room, the smell of wood smoke, the sound of rain tapping on the windows. Their union that night was multi-layered, composed of observation, curiosity, and the gradual understanding of each other's essence. There was no rush, no imposed expectation. Moments unfolded according to an internal logic, accessible only to them. Alcmene noticed how he moved objects, adjusted his posture with each word, how even silence conveyed meaning. These small, repeated details created a sense of closeness, deep and unobtrusive. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the energy in the room shifted. Alcmene's awareness of the world, of her place within it, and of the hidden potential stirring inside her expanded. This encounter was not an event for recording or judgment. It was a living moment, a bridge between the familiar and the extraordinary. Alcmene sensed that her future choices and paths were already touched by a force greater than herself. Though the night passed and life returned to its measured rhythm, subtle changes remained. The wind seemed to carry new patterns, the hills glowed with a different light, and even the village animals moved with slight unease, as if sensing the extraordinary woven into the ordinary. Within Alcmene, the life of a child had begun to form, inheriting both her mortal perceptiveness and the divine spark of Zeus. The story of Heracles, born of this union, represents the intertwining of mortal courage and divine power, a spark that will echo through legends and inspire awe for generations. But that tale itself belongs to another chapter, a different unfolding of destiny. Just as in ancient Greece gods sometimes walked among mortals, in other lands and cultures similar unions carried their own secrets, quietly shaping the world in ways both subtle and profound. The warmth left behind by the story of Zeus and Alcmene slowly dissolves, giving way to a colder breath, sharper, quieter, filled with distant echoes. In the northern lands, where the sky feels closer and silence carries weight, divine paths cross human lives in a very different way. Here, fate does not rush. It waits, watches, and returns. Snow-laden forests and frozen rivers stretch far beyond the eyes, and the long nights carry a stillness that sharpens every sound, every thought, every heart. Here, the ruler of the gods is Odin, not a god of thunder or sudden desire, but a god of knowledge, sacrifice, and consequence. He is the one who traded his eye for wisdom, who endured the stillness of the world tree to grasp the language of runes. Odin moves through the worlds as a wanderer, gathering fragments of what has been and what must come. He is both distant and present, a being whose choices ripple across realms. When he turns his attention toward a mortal, it is not comfort he seeks, but alignment with what fate has already set in motion. It was the seeress Groa, keeper of ancient songs and truths born from loss, who spoke to him of Rind. She spoke of a woman living far from Asgard, in a northern court surrounded by forests thick with pine and birch, where winters were long, Loyalty was learned early, and life moved with careful, measured steps. Rind was described differently in each telling. A princess of distant lands, a giantess by blood, a mortal woman touched by the divine. Yet all versions agreed on her resilience, her sharp intelligence, and her unyielding sense of duty. A woman who could not be easily swayed by appearances or by the promises of gods. Rind's life was a tapestry of restraint, discipline, and service. She carried herself with quiet dignity, attending to her people, maintaining the court, and living by the rhythms of her land. Her world was ruled by duty, not prophecy. Trust was earned, not given. When Odin first appeared before her, he did not reveal himself as a god. He came in the guise of a war leader, a man seasoned by battles and authority. He spoke with confidence, yet a gentle attentiveness underlay each gesture. Rind listened respectfully, but her heart remained guarded. Power alone did not move her. His second visit took another form. Odin returned as a craftsman, skilled with iron and fire, offering protection, guidance, and the promise of stability. In the northern lands, where survival depended on alliances as much as courage, such an offer carried weight. Yet Rind refused again. Even when he appeared as a noble warrior, whose honor was known and admired, whose presence inspired respect, her answer did not change. Her eyes measured him, her mind weighed him, but she remained firm. Unlike the swift and artful deception of Zeus, this story unfolded slowly, each encounter a test of patience, will, and perception. Distance, refusal, and repetition defined their connection. Rind did not trust easily. Odin did not impose sudden closeness. Their bond grew not from desire, but from inevitability, a recognition that some threads of destiny cannot be untangled. When illness weakened Rind, and the certainty of her world seemed to tremble, Odin returned once more. This time, he appeared not as conqueror or teacher, but as one allowed into the fragile space between human life and mortality. The barrier between God and Rind's life transformed as well. She did not ascend, nor did she vanish untouched by myth. She remained a mortal marked by consequence, her strength and perseverance visible in how she continued to navigate her court and her people, carrying the quiet weight of a union that reshaped worlds. Her name persisted in songs not for fame, but for the role she played in the delicate threads of fate, a reminder that the actions of mortals and gods are inextricably entwined. In the northern legends, love is rarely soft. It is a burden carried with patience, shaping generations long after the moment has passed. Their communication unfolded slowly, based on careful trust rather than sudden intimacy, unlike the swift passion between Zeus and Alcmene. Each gesture, each glance, and each measured word wove a subtle understanding that endured through the child they brought into the world. Beneath warmer skies, the meeting of gods and mortals followed different rhythms, equally secret, equally transformative. The night slowly turns its gaze eastward, where creation itself once depended on such a union. In the earliest ages, when the rivers of China still carved their own paths and the earth was untamed, Nuwa, the goddess of creation, moved with careful purpose. Songs of the elders remember her as the one who shaped humanity from yellow clay, pressing life into fragile forms and breathing awareness into them. But her work extended far beyond mortal villages. When a great rupture opened the sky, letting torrents of fire and water pour upon the world, she gathered stones of 7 colors, melting them over divine fire, and patched the heavens, sealing each tear through which chaos threatened to descend. To hold back the flood, she wove mats of golden reeds, placing them along the rising waters, diverting currents and protecting lands and people. Even today, the tilt of the sky and the curve of the rivers carry faint traces of her intervention, guiding waters toward the southeast and shaping the very flow of Chinese rivers. Fuxi, remembered as the first emperor and cultural hero, rose alongside these cosmic events. Under Nuwa's guidance, he introduced innovations that would shape civilization: systems for recording observations of stars and seasons, techniques to manage and store water, methods of hunting and preserving food, and the foundations of communal governance. He taught people to interpret natural signs, the flight of birds, the changes in rivers, the patterns of clouds, as guidance for survival and planning. Where Nuwa embodied creation, foresight, and cosmic balance, Fuxi bridged these lessons into human practice, embedding understanding into daily life, art, and ritual. Their bond unfolded gradually, not in sudden passion, but in mutual recognition and trust. Nuwa noticed Fuxi's attentiveness and capacity to learn. He recognized the magnitude of her responsibility, the care with which she held the world. Unlike other myths of rapid encounters, their story is one of deliberate union, where timing, wisdom, and attention define the connection. From this partnership, descendants were born who carried the dual inheritance of divine perception and mortal insight. These children became teachers, leaders, and innovators, bearing knowledge of natural phenomena, celestial cycles, and ethical conduct. They were not merely heirs to survival skills, but to cultural memory, societal structure, and moral guidance, ensuring that humanity could thrive under the shadow and support of higher wisdom. Even the landscape itself bears their signature. Where the sky leaned slightly and the earth shifted subtly, rivers curved, mountains rose with gentle irregularity, and sacred sites were chosen according to cosmic alignment. A reminder that creation and order require patience, care, and respect for natural forces. Fuxi's role was to translate these rhythms into human understanding, establishing calendars, ritual practices, and communal codes that allowed humans to anticipate change, collaborate effectively, and maintain harmony with the world around them. Through him, the patterns of heaven became intelligible to human minds, and the world gained a structure where the divine and mortal coexisted in balance. This story is not one of gentle romance or fleeting desire. Through Nuwa and Fuxi, creation and civilization advanced hand in hand, one shaping life and repairing the cosmos, the other interpreting and embedding these lessons in human culture. Knowledge, ethical principles, and practical wisdom flowed from them like rivers finding their course, shaping generations with quiet but lasting influence. Across distant lands, new mortal and divine hearts await their meeting, forming secret bonds that will quietly ripple through history and legend. On the gentle slopes of Mount Ida, where sunlight lazily filtered through dense canopies and pastures flowed between stones, Anchises lived, far from palaces, intrigues, and noisy councils. Though he descended from the royal line of Troy, his life was tied not to royal power, but to the breath of the earth. He tended cattle, watched how the wind played with the grass, and could see the invisible signs through which the world revealed its secrets. The mountains taught him patience, the quiet valleys taught attentiveness, and the sky taught him to perceive the subtle connections between earth and stars. He did not expect the gods to intervene in his everyday life. He believed their interest in mortals was quiet and distant, manifesting only in omens or rare wonders. That is why the sudden appearance of a young woman on the hillside struck him so profoundly. She moved with remarkable grace. Each step seemed part of the terrain, as if the mountain itself guided her path. Her garments marked her as noble, yet there were no attendants or servants, only she and the world around her. Nature received her calmly. Animals lifted their heads, but did not tremble. When she spoke, her voice was soft, clear, confident, without a trace of command. The stranger introduced herself as a Phrygian princess, separated from her retinue and sent here by Hermes. The messenger god's name explained part of the story, but not the whole mystery. Anchises listened, feeling a strange pull and sensing the significance of the moment. They spent the day together. They watched the movement of clouds, the whisper of the grass, and the breathing of the mountains. The guests spoke of distant lands, of cities rising and falling like waves upon the sea, of the force of desire capable of moving gods and mortals alike. She knew the mountain with precision, as if memory itself guided her steps. Anchises noticed how effortlessly she understood the world, how attentively she caught light and shadow, as if every moment were a living being. Their closeness grew quietly, imperceptibly, yet with a depth that both pressed the heart and stretched time. For the first time, Anchises felt complete presence and understood that the world had opened a window before him into the unusual, almost magical. Later, he learned the truth. That woman was Venus, the goddess of desire, compelled by Zeus to spend part of her life among mortals, concealing her divine nature. Her name, her appearance, and the story she told were all part of the trial. She sought no gratitude, demanded no worship, but revealed to Anchises the meaning of their encounter, responsibility and consequence. Their union could not be spoken of. A single word might have drawn punishment, and the consequences would have reached him directly. He realized he had crossed a boundary inaccessible to ordinary mortals and agreed to keep the secret. Venus spoke of the future. From their union would come Aeneas, surviving the fall of Troy, enduring exile, and carrying the legacy of a future people. Anchises understood. His role was small, yet essential. Through Aeneas, the bond of Anchises and Venus intertwined with the fate of cities and peoples. When the goddess departed, the mountain returned to its familiar rhythm. Leaves whispered in the wind, streams flowed, and the cries of animals echoed as before. But the young man himself had changed. Silence became heavier, memory of the events sharper, almost burning. In time, pride overcame caution, and he revealed part of the story. The reaction came immediately. The sky flashed, thunder shook the stones, lightning struck nearby. Zeus had noticed. He survived. Venus protected him, gently diverting the lightning. His strength diminished, his body marked by divine attention, but he remained alive. Anchises continued to live among hills and pastures. Every glance at the sky, every detail of the earth reminded him of that encounter. An encounter that had changed the future of entire generations. When the world had not yet been divided into kingdoms, and the sky still readily answered the call of the earth, the realm of the heavenly spirits stretched above the mountains of Korea. There ruled Wanin, lord of the highest heaven. His son, Hwanung, differed from the other gods. His gaze was directed not only upward, but also downward, toward humans, their lives, their labor, and their fears. He saw chaos, disease, hunger, and disorder, and he knew that the human world was in need of guidance and law. With his father's permission, Hwanung descended from the heavens. He came down upon the sacred Mount Peak-tu, accompanied by the spirits of wind, rain, and clouds. There he founded the heavenly city of Cinci and began to rule over humankind, teaching agriculture, healing, laws, and sacred rites. Under his guidance, the world grew more ordered, yet it remained incomplete. Between heaven and earth, a boundary still existed, one that could not be crossed without sacrifice. At that time, beings whose nature was closer to the earth than to the gods lived near the human world. Among them was Ungyo, a bear. From the shadows of the forest, she observed human life. She felt drawn to it, to the warmth of the hearth, to speech, to memory. Together with a tiger, she came before Huaneng and asked him to change their fate and grant them human form. Huaneng did not reject their plea. He proposed a trial. Whoever could endure 40 days in a cave, living only on garlic and mugwort and avoiding the light of the sun, would become human. The tiger could not bear the hardship and left. Ungyo remained. In the darkness of the cave, she endured hunger, solitude, and fear, abandoning her former nature. On the 21st day, the trial came to an end. The bear was transformed into a woman. Thus, Ungyo appeared, mortal in body, yet inwardly transformed. She lived among humans, but she was alone. She had no clan, no husband, no protection. Her heart turned toward the one who had given her new life. Beneath a sacred tree, she prayed for a child, asking that her existence might gain meaning. Huaneng saw her. He knew who she had been and what she had endured. In her fate was something unknown to the immortals, the willing renunciation of one's own nature for the sake of the future. Between the heavenly ruler and the earthly woman arose a bond that could not be called simple desire. It was a union of understanding and choice. Their joining became a breach of the established order. From Huaneng and Ungyo was born a son, Dangun. In him, heaven and earth were joined, divine will and human destiny intertwined. He grew among humans, inheriting his father's wisdom and his mother's resilience. In time, Dangun founded the first Korean state, Gojoseon. His reign marked the beginning of a new era, in which authority was regarded as a gift from heaven, and order as a reflection of cosmic balance. Through this union, the world was changed. People received not merely a ruler, but a symbol of their connection to a higher order. The state became an extension of heavenly will, and the origin of the ruling lineage was considered sacred. Thus, the love of a god and a mortal woman laid the foundation of a people and its history. But the price of this union was high. Huaneng remained immortal, belonging to the heavens. Ungyo was mortal. Their paths could not remain intertwined forever. The legends do not speak of her end, yet her disappearance feels like a quiet departure, without exaltation or reward. She gave more to the world than she received in return. This union showed that love between heaven and earth can become the foundation of order rather than chaos. Yet it also reminds us that such bonds always demand sacrifice, and most often, that sacrifice is borne by the mortal side. The story of Huaneng and Ungyo has remained in the memory of the people as the beginning of all things, and as a fateful choice that altered the course of time. Stories of gods and mortals rarely end happily. Their unions were not formed for comfort or beauty. They arose where the world itself was splitting apart, where the old order could no longer hold balance. The gods descended to humanity not out of mercy or whim, but because the very fabric of existence demanded intervention. Each such union became a turning point. Heroes were born, peoples emerged, cities fell, and ideas of power and fate were reshaped. Love in these tales did not bind hearts, but layers of reality. It brought meaning, yet always demanded a price. The gods returned to their realms. Humans remained, with memory, with loss, with a legacy that could not be undone. Secrets that could never be spoken aloud continued to live on in myths, in bloodlines, in fear of the sky, and in hope for its favor. Thus the world became what we know it to be: imperfect, fragile, yet connected to something greater. These unions did not destroy the world entirely. They changed its shape. They deepened history and made human destiny matter. And that is why myths of gods and mortals still endure. Within them lies a reminder that love can reshape the course of history, leaving behind order, meaning, and a quiet sense of continuity.